Welcome to the Executive Coaching Series, a space for bold conversations about leadership, coaching, and the culture required to build organizations that actually work. Welcome, everyone. I am glad you're here. Today, we're taking a practical look at how coaching is functioning inside of organizations right now. Not as a perk, not as a buzzword, but as something that's increasingly tied to leadership capacity, execution, and real business outcomes. Organizations are making decisions about whether to build internal coaching capabilities, to bring in external expertise, expand access, specialize at the top, and now how AI fits into all of that. Those aren't abstract questions. They affect budgets, talent retention, and how leaders operate under pressure. I'm joined by experienced coaches who work closely with leaders in complex environments. And today we're going to explore what's exactly working, where coaching delivers value, and what organizations need to think carefully about as the landscape continues to evolve. But before we get started, let's meet today's panelists. I am so excited to work with these amazing coaches, and I would like to invite them to introduce themselves.
Hello, I'm Rachel Bamber from Brighter Thinking, and I'm connecting from England today. And I've worked as and had my own business since 21 years ago now, starting off as a life coach, and more recently, and probably for the last over 10 years, working as an executive coach and leadership coach, and especially for C-suite and all over the world. I've coached and trained leaders on every continent, Antarctica to be confirmed. But I'm very excited because I have recently, last couple of months, published my first book, The Brighter Thinking Coach, which actually has a couple of chapters on some of the subjects that we're discussing today, AI and also beyond the boardroom as well. Very happy to be here.
Oh, we're so happy to have you here, Rachel. Thank you.
Hello, everyone. My name is Tanisha Parrish, and my mission is to unlock human potential. I'm an executive coach and the CEO of Life Under Innovation, which is an executive coaching and leadership development firm that focuses on accelerating leadership at the pace of business growth. And just some context, I have a business background. I've worked in the corporate space for over 20 years. In parallel, I discovered this thing called coaching and fell in love with it from my own journey and really believe that this was something that everyone, if desired, should have access to. I've worked at large companies like Marriott International, all the way to startups like Better Up, where I led our leadership development and learning development for the coaches in that organization. And now I am leading my own organization. So, really excited to be here. I have a team of coaches and facilitators where we work with a lot of high growth companies, whether it's PE backed portfolio companies or startups, to really scale their leadership and drive those business results.
Wonderful. Thank you, Tanisha. We're so glad you're here.
Good to be here.
Hello, everyone. My name is Delphine Parmenter. Similar to Tanisha, I'm an executive coach working in the corporate space, more specifically coaching senior leaders and leadership teams. We work with a team of coaches in my company called Illumia, which is the approach to move from the head to the heart and really bring the emotions to an emotional understanding to change implementation and strategy. So I'm based in Paris. That explains my very French name, but I work in an international setting with people who work in English, but maybe are working in a different language as their first language. Work mostly across Europe and quite a bit in the Middle East. So I'm looking forward to the conversation with my colleagues here today. Thank you very much.
Oh, thank you for being here, Delphine. We're so glad you are. All right. So, thank you all for being here on our panel today. We're going to start with kind of a practical question, if you will, but this kind of kickstart a little bit of our conversation for the following questions. When does it make sense for an organization to use internal coaching when it's wiser to, and when is it wiser to bring in someone external? So when does it make more sense to use someone internally, a coach internally, and when is it wiser to bring in someone from the outside?
Thank you, Monica. Great question. And I think I would probably always argue that it's best to have external coaches. And that's based on what my clients tell me. And also, I'm not allowed to say too much because I signed an NDA, but I do work in elite sport. And the reason I mention this is because one of the reasons that they hired me and the leaders in elite sport hired me was because I'm not connected with anything to do with the media, the sport, the governing bodies, and all the things that go around that. And they felt that because of that, they trusted me and they speak to me and know that it's not going to get back to anyone. And so it's that level of trust and the fact that I've got that strong clarity of distance. And that also, I think, plays out in organizations, because when I'm coaching leaders and even, those on the C-suite or even more junior members, for me, it's all about trust. Because if your coachee or client doesn't feel they can trust you, they're never going to fully open up. And they're not going to get the most out of the coaching engagement because they're always going to have that fear of what's going to get back, or, am I saying something stupid? Am I putting my career in jeopardy? Or, is she going to tell my boss or whatever? So I do have, as you can tell, strong opinions on that. However, I have trained internal coaches in brain-based coaching skills. And so I do feel that there is a need. However, I think my vision and wish would be for all leaders, all managers to have coaching skills, because we know that all the team members thrive and they're more able to think for themselves. So the results are faster and it's a much happier work culture. So, I am open to it as well.
Oh, that's fantastic. Thank you. Other thoughts?
Well, I'll add that it goes back to what problem you're trying to solve, right? And what is the organization's objectives for their leadership investment or their investment executive coaching. So, for instance, internal coaching can work well if you are trying to build muscle memory inside the organization. You want to reinforce a very specific culture. If you are developing managers in a specific way, having an internal coach that understands the culture and ecosystem can be helpful to the context and applying that to coaching leaders in the organization. I do agree that confidentiality and trust are paramount to the coaching relationship. And not only the coaching relationship, but when you have that, your results are amplified. So when you don't have that, the coaching relationship really wilts, right? It whittles down. So I agree that an external coach really can reinforce that confidentiality and that trust. They also can bring in new perspectives. So there's the purity of coaching. I always say, for me, I'm part coach, part business partner, especially at that executive level. And so while coaching is going to go deep, we're going to ask questions, we're going to explore your beliefs. That business partner perspective is where I would say, well, is there an opportunity for us to brainstorm together? Right. And that is the power of external coaches. They have seen different organizations, they've seen different leaders, and they can bring in that unique perspective if it's appropriate for the coaching conversation. So I don't want to say one is better than other. I always start with what problem are we trying to solve, and then determine the right solution. I also think about this from a business perspective too. The cost of hiring full-time executive coaches internal to your organization can be pretty high. While you can work with an individual or a firm to support those coaching needs, and that allows you flexibility to say, we need coaches to support this individual on specific manager skill sets, or we need coaches that have this background. So that's part of some of the work that I do in bringing in the variety of coaches that have skills and perspectives and backgrounds that can support the totality of the organization, regardless of what level they're at.
Awesome. Thank you so much. That's very interesting. And, as a person, as a solo coach myself, hearing that perspective from someone coming from the outside and having the new perspective, that's interesting. I had not thought about that before. Thank you. Thank you very much. So, our second question, there's a lot of conversation about who coaching is really for. Do you see coaching becoming more democratized or more specialized for those senior level individuals? And what's actually happening in organizations when it comes to who gets the coaching? Like, who is the coaching for in organizations these days?
I can jump in on that one. I believe very strongly that everyone should have a coach. And I see both democratization and specialization. I think as we see and make this tool, this approach, this philosophy available across the organization, we see the benefit at all levels of the organization. The specialization comes at the top end of the organization, where you need someone, as Tanisha says, a solid business background, experience with the C-suite, with boards to actually gain that trust and confidence. At the lower level of the organization, maybe there are other ways to democratize, and there are different offers there. So I see both the democratization and the specialization. I'm wondering what Rachel is seeing in the U. This is kind of a European Middle East perspective. So I'm wondering what you're maybe seeing in other parts of the world.
Thanks, Delphine. And, I agree with you when you say that, wouldn't it be wonderful if everyone in the world had a coach, and how different everything would be. However, I would say not everyone wants a coach, as it were. So, we want to always be thinking about whether somebody's actually ready to have coaching, because it does involve doing things differently, thinking differently, as you all know, and taking action and getting different results. Now, certainly, I think all around the world, and correct me if you think I'm wrong, coaching has been seen as this often sort of elitist thing that only the high flyers in organizations get offered. Certainly, I've been brought in as an external coach on loads of leadership programs for those kind of team members, and also for the C-suite. It's also thinking, well, who is the organization investing in? Who are they backing? I do know, though, and I do hear, I don't like doing this kind of work where coaching is offered as a remedial solution to sort of coach out people that they want to sort of no longer be working for the organization, or who have had 360 feedback reports that are less than glowing, and they're wanting to fix behaviors, things like that. So I think it depends on how the coaching is offered. But I do think, though, especially now with the rise of AI, and I do write about this in my book, Beyond the Boardroom, I think, that there is a case that there will be different kinds of coaching offered to the more junior members, and perhaps team players who wouldn't ordinarily be thought of by the learning and development departments and the C-suite for having coaching, that they will be offered something, which we see now, but I think it's going to grow, as a perk to help retain talent. So they'll get offered coaching for that. But it may be that the AI coaching is more likely going to be offered to more junior members, and the human coaching side is going to keep being offered to more senior talent. So that's my sense. So Tanisha, what do you think? Or do you think something totally different?
No, I'll just add maybe a slightly different angle. So when we say democratize, I think there are a couple different boxes. There's, is it accessible? And for a long time, it was not accessible, right, due to cost. So I think it's becoming more accessible due to a lot of the coaching platforms and various organizations, right, raising the awareness of coaching. So there's accessibility, there's the awareness of coaching, which I find that so a lot of people are not aware of what coaching is, and they've never had coaching before. So I still have a lot of clients coming saying, I've never had coaching before. So accessibility, yes. Awareness, there's still opportunity to increase awareness. And then where are those individuals that are being invested in the organization? So I think there are a couple different layers. I say overall democratization, yes. And I think that there will be this growing need for specialty, continue to specialize, because just like a doctor or a lawyer, they go and they get trained in general medicine or general law, but then they specialize and that becomes their area of expertise. So I believe that we should start thinking about coaching in that way. If you break your ankle, right, you don't go to the cardiologist, or if you have a cardio issue, you don't go to your general practitioner. Well, if I have a communication challenge that I am specifically trying to overcome, or if I am an individual contributor transitioning to a manager of people, those are very specific problems. And I think it will be important to start to layer on the specializations of coaches to the specialized needs of the individuals that are seeking coaching.
Can I add that I'm actually seeing, the different levels of the organization being served by coaching, and that can be either, through the platforms, as we said. We've had coaching platforms for a good 15 years now, and that makes it accessible and cost effective. But there are other ways to coach, middle managers, high potentials. There are sometimes we see coaching embedded in leadership development programs that involve group coaching. So there's definitely more. It's not reserved in for the elite or the top of the organization. For the customers that I work with, they starting to have a strategy as how to address the needs in the different parts of the organization. And I love the metaphor that Tanisha gave us. That's a really good way to think about things.
I want to add one more thing because Delphine just really hit on something. To date, I think we've been talking about coaching in the one-on-one context. And so it is important to name that there are different ways of coaching, team coaching, group coaching. And I just want to name, as we think about the organizational context for growth and leadership development, there's greater opportunity to focus on the individual coaching paired with team coaching. How do we take a manager or a leader and grow that individual and then support the supporting team so that the entity is greater, not just the individual? So I just wanted to call that out as well.
And that's a really good call, Tanisha, because I'm seeing the growth of in demand for group coaching.
Mm-hmm.
So where large global organizations are developing leaders and realizing that, luckily, that people want that connection. They want that social connection, and that they want to realize that they're not alone with the challenges that they face, for example, with the members of their team and all sorts of things like that. And so what they're doing is having different leaders from all over the world, different departments of the organization, join the groups, and they get then to debrief their learning from the training, but also to discuss their real-time challenges and get the support of the coach, and also the input from, and the wonderful collective wisdom from the leaders that they wouldn't have ordinarily met in the organization. And so I think because of this, the human brain is a social organ, and it wants to connect. We don't do very well when we're on our own. And obviously, with the rise of more online working, we've seen an impact in that. And so I think this is one way that coaching can be more affordable, and more people can benefit in a whole variety of ways.
What incredible insight. Thank you all so much. That was awesome and really insightful for me, even as a solo coach. And I don't, I coach specific individuals about specific thing, but understanding that coaching is available or could be for everybody, and some organizations, making it available for everybody, I think is probably a very important thing somehow, some way, whether it's through AI or through having a coach for the C-suite. Very fascinating. Thank you guys so much for that wonderful conversation. So we all know that insight doesn't automatically lead to change. In your experience, what actually helps leaders move from awareness to sustained behavioral change?
Well, I've got a lot of experience in this because of the whole neuroscience of leadership and how the brain works. And the first thing I would say, though, is that, nobody will change unless they want to. They've got to have that desire. And that's why I think when a leader is sent for coaching, as it were, it can be far more challenging for coach and leader and their line manager than if somebody has been offered it as a performance enhancer rather than a fixer, as it were. So that's the first thing I would say. But from a brain point of view, what we know is that a human is far more likely to change their behavior, change their thinking, when it comes from them, when they have thought about it, rather than being told what to do. Because who here likes being told what to do and given advice? The lazy part of our brain, because our brain is lazy, it likes to use the least amount of resources possible, will say, oh yes, just tell me what to do. And I'm sure everyone and all your coaches that you work with, and people watching this, and the coaches watching this will have experienced a client saying, oh, I don't know what to do, just tell me what to do, because we naturally want to do that. But it's not effective in the brain if we do that. What is effective if we help the coachee to think for themselves, come up with their own ideas, and then at that moment of insight that you mentioned, Monica, which is happening so fast in the brain, it's about 40 hertz in the brain, it's the really fast thinking, that flash, and we get excited by that, we get motivated and want to act. And this, for me, is where the coaches add so much value, and the line manager as coach too, if they're doing that, is that you capitalize on that motivation. What are you going to do? You've had this insight. What are you going to do about it? What actions are you going to commit? And then, of course, the coach following up in the next session about what the client said that they were actually going to do. So for me, it's all about helping them set actions at the moment of insight.
So from behavior changes is the work that I think all of us do, right? We want enduring transformation that moves beyond the coaching. And I always tell my clients, my goal is that when our coaching relationship is over, you are equipped with tools, processes, and a way of thinking that allows you to apply that to other areas of your life. So what I found with this nuance between insight and actually allowing someone to go through their journey of awareness is it's equated to like parent and child. So whether you have children or not, you all have parents. And so you can help an individual or child discover something, or you can tell them to do something. And when they're told to do something, they do it without thinking. But when they discover it, in their own unique way, they usually create patterns, and there's a level of enjoyment, and there's a level of curiosity that doesn't stick when they're told to do something. So that's how I kind of equate the parallel to insight in coaching. And I'll just say there are a couple things that I've seen work well. So go to the heart. I always say mindset first, the identity. So, who are you? What do you need to believe in order to achieve the goal that you want to achieve? What conditions need to be different as a result? Start with the identity as the core. Then let's talk about the environment and how the environment supports or detracts from this goal. And then how do you hold yourself accountable? And a lot of these things are what we will work through in coaching, and that really helps drive the behavior change. So I just wanted to bring it and make it real. A lot of times we make it very complex. How do you take someone through the process? And there is a method, right? There's a method to the madness. But we all know we can give the best advice to anyone else. But when it comes to ourselves, we have to really sit and have the right support. And there's a different experience when you're talking to someone that is curious, that is asking questions, that has no agenda, but to serve you and hold you in the best light. So that's what I wanted to share around this conversation around insight and driving behavior change.
What can I add? So finding your own solution is the basic definition of the work that we do. I believe I have a process that I call awareness, action, and autonomy. So we're all here to make ourselves redundant, and that people find a new awareness, act on that new awareness, and continue to make that a habit of the way they show up in the workplace. There is the new beliefs, but in parallel, there's a new way of acting. So I encourage my coachees to experiment with things, act your way into a new way of being. Try this stuff out. In parallel, totally agree with Tanisha. There's a belief. We could take the really general, the really prevalent topic of delegation. So, what do I need to do to start delegating to others? And what is the underlying belief that's holding me back from delegating to others? So, I like to work on both in parallel, but you have to start practicing acting and seeing how those actions feel and are fueling that new belief, the new belief of I don't have to do everything myself, or whatever it is for that person. And then another piece that sometimes I go to recommendations, which is not what I'm supposed to do. But I asked last week a client who started doing some of these things, have you been explicit? Are you telling the members of your team that you're doing things differently because? So we know that a public commitment to action, keeps us committed. We keep consistent with the public commitments that we make. So that's something that I feel is really important, that when I decide to not be the first one to jump in the meeting, not tell everybody to do, that I'm actually telling people that this is an explicit way that I'm trying to behave differently and I need your help. So that's one of the ways that I hope we get to a place where they can make these new commitments to behavior change and transfer that awareness into sustained behavior, as you say.
And you make a really great point there, Delphine, about the leaders asking for help when they are making changes in what they're doing. And one of the things I've really seen is that there seems to be an increase in organizations using 360-degree assessments and getting feedback at all levels, actually. That seems to be growing, and there's so much choice out there for those. And one of the things that I also really recommend, and I think like Delphine said, is that the leader actually shares the findings with their team and those that gave them the feedback, that took the time and energy and effort to do that, and shares what they feel they're doing well, but also what's been highlighted that they're going to work on improving so that their performance improves. But they actually are, as Delphine said, explicit about that with their team and ask for help. Catch them, as Ken Blanchard famously said, catch them doing something right. And by doing that, the leaders then are a lot more vulnerable. And that then helps, and they're there basically saying, look, I'm not perfect. I'm working on this. My time management, for example, is not, I keep arriving at meetings late. You've called me up on it. I'm going to improve that. And for example, so by doing that and then working on that, it then helps the team to go, okay, I don't have to be perfect either. If I want to improve my performance, I can ask for help and share. And so that then, for me, really determines a coaching culture, and one which is very much psychological, much more safer, and that it's okay not to be this, doing everything right all the time and perfect, which I see a lot that people tend to want to be.
Well, this question, great answers, because this is going to lead us straight into our next question. We're talking about sustained behavioral change, awareness. So when you see coaching is working well, for instance, you've got this behavioral change. This is working. People are receptive to coaching. They're actually seeking it out. They're taking it seriously. When you see this working well inside of an organization, what shifts do you see in decision making and execution?
I can jump in. Try to get what we see is a delayed, these pieces take longer. If we want to get people to follow on board with decisions and implementing strategy, there's a lot more time and work that leaders need to invest up front. So it may look like decisions are slower. It may look like strategy is not being executed faster. But when they get to a place where they're investing time up front, and I'm not saying moving to consensus, but co-creating decisions, co-creating how to get things to change, then the implementation, once these decisions are made, the implementation is done with more motivation, ownership, engagement. So the actual back end of what's being executed is faster, but the front end is slower. I don't know if that makes any sense, but that's kind of counterintuitive to maybe what people think they want to achieve. But it seems to be that upfront investment is making the execution, the decision, everyone is moving towards running in the same direction.
Mm-hmm. So what I see in terms of decision making and execution is, again, thinking about it in the context of the individual versus the system, and the system being the organization. So the more individuals that have an investment in leadership development, whether it's coaching or some other form, the greater the shift in the system will be. So maybe what Delphine, I think what I'm seeing in terms of Delphine's sharing was the slowdown may come because one individual can't change the culture, right? Can't change the way of moving of an organization. But what I've seen is when multiple people in a team or an organization are moving forward, right? Even if one's moving a little faster, but this one's coming up as well, the decision velocity accelerates. Now, it doesn't always accelerate in a linear path, but the ultimate currency is time. So leaders are getting time back because they're able to either move to a decision faster or invite constructive conflict to be able to name what the issue is to move forward in a decision. So a lot of those nuances of what is the decision, the clarity around the options or the path that they're going, what blockers might be in front of us, and that healthy conflict to move beyond it is what I see. And when you see that happening, like I said, decision velocity increases, but also productivity increases. We have specific numbers around retention, obviously revenue growth, but there's usually an elevated performance, but an elevated sense of confidence and empowerment that you see with leaders. So I think it's so much more and so much bigger than just the decision making. It's giving people to permission to operate in a certain way and changing the culture. So I always like to make the distinction between what's happening with one individual and also how we shift the whole system, which is really where you get the benefit. Decision velocity, you get the execution clarity, you get the satisfaction, you get the retention, and then you overall have a more healthier organization.
And as Tanisha said, and I agree with this, the more people in the organization that can benefit from coaching, it will speed up the change and any culture change that's going on. And of course, yes, if culture change is required, then those in the C-suite and in the board having coaching is going to really help it, as is those in the lower ranks. And I hate using that expression, but the more junior members, the younger members of the teams having coaching will help. So it's kind of sandwiched there. But to take a slightly different angle, if I may, what we do know is, though, that a lot of the times organizations go slow, businesses go slow, teams go slow when they're stuck. They're stuck, perhaps there's a transition that's happening, and not a lot gets done. Now, by having coaching, it helps speed up the whole process and it helps make decisions faster, because often the leaders will come to the coaching feeling stuck, saying, I've got this big decision to make. And as a coach, they will be helped to work through their thinking and actually making the decision and setting the actions to go off and do it. So I really do believe that coaching in the long run saves organization a lot of time and a lot of this stuckness, which, as we all know, it's not fun when you're feeling stuck and don't know what to do. So, yeah.
And Rachel, you made me think of something when you said stuck. I always use the term of bottlenecks and kinks. And if you release the kink, then things flow more smoothly. And so many of my clients in our sessions, we reveal how they are being the bottlenecks to their team or, to their leadership. And so releasing them as the bottlenecks, getting them a framework in which they can understand, well, now is a time when I should be releasing these types of this type of work. I should be delegating more, and I should be focusing my time and attention on these specific things. Then the organization moves smoother. So I just wanted to name that specific call out around releasing the bottlenecks in organizations and just giving visibility to where the kinks in the armor may be.
Well, speaking of transformation and things moving faster, let's talk about AI. So as AI becomes more embedded in organizations, where do you see it supporting coaching, and where do you see the human coach become even more important?
6 years ago, I spoke at the International Coaching Federation conference in the UK and Europe, and it was titled The Rise of the Coaching Machines. And I polled about 500 people that were attending, do you think AI is going to replace you? Do you think AI is going to be, good at coaching? And overwhelmingly, the audience said no. And there was a lot of fear, a lot of resistance. And I argued that I do. And I still stand by that on all the research that I've done since. And I have been involved in testing AI coaching and over the years, actually, and seeing how it developed. And so I do think AI will serve a purpose. However, I think we've got to be open to what that purpose is and how big a purpose it is. And what I mean by that, I found that AI coaching at the moment, an opportunity for it is in role play. And when a coachee is thinking, use the example, they've got a team member who is not getting stuff done, they're procrastinating and all the rest of it. And I was able to use the AI to pretend that they were that team member and say things that the team member might say. And it actually made it a lot of fun, but it was very useful and obviously in a very safe way. So there is a use for it. However, it's good on what I would call goal task focused type of coaching. I want to get stuff done. I've got a goal in this. However, I soon realized that, where AI coaching, I think at the moment has its limitations is that it's sort of running set programs. It has a set way of doing it, for example. And yes, it can clarify answers better than it could a few years ago, but it's still not the same as being human. Now, I know there's a thinking that human coaches will be offered, and again, this is going against what we said earlier, it will be human coaches for the C-suite and AI coaching will be for the junior members of the organization and maybe offered as the perk, as I said earlier. So I think the jury for me is still out on how it will incorporate. I think AI has got a lot more uses behind the scene in coaching engagements, reminders and platforms and all the rest of it. And, doing drone deliveries, and maybe we'll become, holograms of ourselves and be able to send ourselves to other coaching engagements at one point and sort of using it that way. However, I do think that if humans train AI to have human skills like intuition, empathy, then human coaches will get phased out at some point. However, I like to think of ourselves as thinking partners. And I think for me, the one worry is, apart from the ethics, if you're using AI coaching, it's storing the information, sharing it across its network. So is anything confidential? That's one thing. But the other worry is if people stop thinking for themselves.
To build on that, thanks, Rachel. I don't have any fear of AI replacing me. I think, the thing that we say is AI will replace someone who doesn't know how to use AI. So I'm trying to integrate and use it as a complement, not directly in a session. I think the big ethical question is still unanswered, because I never want, we always promise confidentiality, and AI, by its design so far, is recording, generating data. So we don't want any of that. But I think there's something really interesting that we can, the human coach needs to maybe pay more attention to, is helping the people that we coach have a more critical thinking approach to the AI that they're using in the workplace. So I think it might be opening, a new perspective. Something that we need to help our coaches think about is, what are your critical thinking skills when you're using generative AI tools?
So if everyone isn't thinking about how AI is going to change their worlds in every industry, then you're not ready for what's coming. I'll just say, right, let's just look at AI as any other technology, and that's a simplification of the power of AI. But technology always creates disruption, oftentimes with elevation. So I think about AI, and I am not an AI expert, but AI is definitely going to change things in the coaching space. And I say that as someone who has worked at a company that was including AI in coaching, and I'm actively integrating it into our work at Life Under Innovation. So, for instance, things like pattern recognition or reflection prompts or surfacing themes and nudges between sessions. I think AI can and will do a beautiful job of extending the coaching relationship beyond the conversation in ways that will just create exponential growth for the client. I also think about the human side of it, right? So I don't know what's possible. I imagine there will be tons of AI coach bots that, you could interact with and won't even know that it's not a human. And I also think about this in a bigger context of there's a loneliness epidemic going on, at least in the US, but I posit in the world as well. And so it will be interesting to see in the next decade or so how people cling or move closer to humans. I do think humans will still have a role in the coaching industry, in the coaching space. There's a difference between having a conversation with someone, being in proximity with someone, being able to see and discern the emotional cues that goes beyond the spoken word. AI may be able to interpret that. We don't know. But I call this the human operating system. And so there's going to be power in the pairing of the technology of AI with the human operating system, whether it comes down to self-awareness, judgment, creativity, innovation, leadership, new ways of thinking. AI is programmed by the brain, but I truly believe our brains, the human brains, are light years ahead in terms of creativity and leadership. So I think it will be a interesting journey to go on. I encourage everyone to get curious, experiment with AI. I also think about it, right? There's the coaching relationship, but then there's also how a lot of coaches run their businesses. So many coaches are independent or solo coaches. A lot of the stuff that you don't want to do, the administrative, can be offloaded to AI. And I think that's a beautiful thing. And then there's the experience of what it looks like in the coaching relationship. And then how might AI improve the analytics and the ability to measure the results of the growth of the individual in an organization. So I'm an advocate. I'm also an optimist. I hope that the powers that be are considering the privacy and ethical components of it. And I think maybe that's where we as coaches can be vocal about what it actually looks like to hold the space of confidentiality, trust, ethics, and bring that into this new world of AI.
And I think there is ultimately an opportunity here because of the innovation in technology that us humans, how can we get even better at being human? And the skills and the talents that Tanisha described there, and especially for everyone who's working as a coach or leading people, well, how can you increase your skills in empathy, at listening to your intuition, your listening skills, and your presence with others, helping yourself and others to think more creatively? And I think actually, the more that we focus on that, then we will be sought after in the future as coaches and developers of other humans.
I love that, Rachel. How can we get better at being humans? And I do believe that there will be kind of a division or maybe a separating of coach quality as you were speaking to. So we have a lot of coaches. Oftentimes it's very hard to determine, who's the right coach for you, who's a good coach. And I do believe that getting really clear on what's separating us as humans, also how we're doing our research, how we're doing our training. One of the benefits will be the quality of the coaches will increase.
Yes, and I think also you mentioned earlier, and I think Delphine as well, about the idea of specialization, and I would say niching, how and being an expert in particular areas, and that organizations will seek out somebody who's an expert at helping people delegate or increase their management of the team, things like that. And so coaches, I think there again is an opportunity now, and to do it now and really start thinking of it now. What do you want to specialize in? And maybe also leaders too. What do you want to get known for? So that your skills are very much readily transferable.
I just wanted to jump in and give a little bit of a practical example of how maybe tying together all these themes of democratization, behavior change, embedding in the organization. I have a team that is using an AI tool to track who's speaking, how much time do they occupy in the meeting, what are the themes that every individual in the meeting is bringing up, and they get this data of the fact that John is occupying 40% of the voice or 56% of the voice. Wow, that's data. That's sustaining behavior change. So, when John looks at this data and he comes to me in his next session, he says, I didn't realize that, I was jumping in, and my goal is to let others take the lead. So it's really can be a really powerful complement to what we do.
What a great conversation about AI. Thank you so much for that. As a coach myself, I have been curious about where we're headed with AI. Fantastic. Delphine, Tanisha, Rachel, thank you so much for being with us today and sharing your expertise. It's been wonderful having you here.
Thank you.
Thank you, Monica. Thank you, Delinda.
What I really appreciate about today's conversation is the reminder that coaching isn't about adding more activity, more stuff. It's about building the stronger leadership capacity in environments that are only getting more complex. These are exactly the kinds of thoughtful conversations we care about fostering at Delenta. Whether it's internal or external, specialized or scaled, supported by AI or fully human, the question isn't whether coaching exists, it's whether it's being used intentionally and well. Thank you so much to our panelists for bringing depth and clarity to that conversation today. And thank you to everyone who's joined us. We hope you'll join us next time.